Welcome to the Dibley Diaries for this week. This week, during Thought for the Week, we're going to be looking at Luke 4 and the temptations of Jesus in there. So for the rural challenge, I wanted to think about influence, power and influence within rural church communities. Because rural church communities tend to be small, it is easy for them to have one or maybe two people whose voice overrides everybody else's in the decision-making processes. This sometimes still is the person who lives in the big house. And this power and influence needs to be used very wisely. So I have worked in places where the person with the most power and influence has been doing a fantastic job of influencing the whole village to be positive towards the church community, to encourage people to be part of the church community, to be in touch with the needs of the village community. But I have also seen people who have used their power and influence to follow entirely their own agenda without really proper thought or consideration for what it would be as the church community. So I know one place where they did a big restoration project and they put in lots and lots of lighting, including floodlights, but the person with the power and influence in that position said, no, of course we don't need a sound system. Why on earth would we need a sound system? And so that is somewhere where actually the accessibility needs of the whole community was disregarded because of the opinions of one person. And then sometimes you see it with the provision of worship services where the most powerful and influential person in the church community has decreed that this is what should happen to the pattern of services, and that might not really be what's best for the church community, but they are so influential in those decisions that they use their power to actually completely follow their own agenda. You may know who these people are in your village when I describe them to you. If you don't know who they are, then there is a chance it might be you. But it's a challenge for all of us. How do we use our power and influence in a small church setting, not to overpower and bring our agenda against other people's agenda, but actually to use our power and influence for the good of the whole community? Thought for the week this week is based on Luke chapter 4 verses 1 to 13, and it's the description of Jesus being tempted by the devil in the desert. And when I read this passage, I always think of a thing which happens in Doctor Who. In the classic Matt Smith era, there's an episode where River Song throws herself off. It's said it's a 50-storey building, which is pretty high, about Shard sort of height. And then she is caught by the TARDIS. They kind of fly the TARDIS to the edge of the building, open the doors, and they say that she actually lands into the swimming pool. I hope after however many years it is, probably 10 years, that is not a spoiler for you. But I think of that because one of the things which the devil is encouraging Jesus to do is to test God and to test his power and influence with God by throwing himself off the temple and seeing if the angels will catch him. And Jesus said, I'm not testing God like that. We shouldn't be, I'm not testing God in that way. It's something to do with Jesus' self-confidence, his identity, knowing who he is. But Jesus is just, I am not going to tempt God. I'm not going to give in to that temptation to test God in that way. And the other temptations, I hope you can remember or you can look them up, are for Jesus to kind of become the king of the whole world using the devil's power. So Jesus to use his power and his influence to become ruler of everywhere, kind of in a power sharing kind of arrangement sort of thing. And Jesus just says, I'm not doing that either. That is not what this is about. This is not about my power. And then there is the first temptation in the list, is the one where Jesus is hungry and the devil says to him, just turn these stones into bread. Just turn these stones into bread. That's all you need to do. And Jesus refuses to do it. Jesus says that he won't do that. He says, man does not live by bread alone. So, interesting. Jesus doesn't turn stone into bread, but Jesus does later on turn bread into lots more bread, so much bread that there were leftover bread for people who hadn't brought any packed lunch with them. And there's something there about Jesus doing this miracle to the benefit of others, not to the benefit of himself. And I actually think it's partly also to do with why Jesus had to use the little boy's lunchbox. There's something about the fact that Jesus was sharing what they already had, the bread into lots more bread and not the stones into bread, but all for the benefit of other people, for the benefit of the community, not for Jesus's own benefit. The same when Jesus turns the water into the wine, as recorded in John's Gospel. Jesus is turning one drink to another drink, but it is for the benefit of other people, the benefit of those who otherwise would be brought to a terrible place of shame. So Jesus' miracles are bringing good to others. They're not for him. So Jesus is refusing to use his power and influence for the benefit of only him. When he performs miracles later on, they are for the benefit of other people. And I think that's a really good question for us this Lent. How are we using our power and influence for the good of others, not for the good of ourselves? Now, you may say to me, oh Janet, we don't have any power. We don't really have any influence. That's just not true. Every time you buy a product, you have power and you have influence. Every time you open your mouth and speak to someone else, that word has power and influence for them. So this Lent, let us all think about what the power and influence that we have means for us. Are we using it for good, as is Jesus' example, and not using it for our own ends? The Dibley moment of the week this week is a poignant one, not one to do with something comedic, but when Pete Greig talks about miracles, he says that actually in our church community, when a miracle happens, we should give thanks for it, and remembering always to give thanks for it, maybe until the next miracle comes along. And certainly I've been blessed with miracles in the communities where I have lived and worked. Lots of miracles to do with babies who were born to parents who were told that they would never be able to have a baby, babies who have survived difficult complications in pregnancies where they thought they weren't going to survive, and babies who have been born prematurely, who have then gone on to live and flourished and grown to have really good lives. So I just want to give thanks for those, for the communities where I have lived, where those have happened, and to say, well, what are the miracles in your community? Are you continuing to give thanks for them? And that's it for the Dibley Diaries for this week. I pray that you and your village, however large or small, have a really blessed week where your community can be blessed with miracles.